good evening, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nights at the Round Table. I'm your host today, Camar Davis, and this is Andres Sosa. Now you may notice that we have a different setup. We are not in the studio. This is the Soda Orchestra Room. We today have a special episode because it is a live audience. Audience, make some noise. All right. Now, I want to say before we truly get into things that this is my first time meeting Mr. Andres here. We did some research, as usual when we're making a podcast like this. You have a very fascinating story, rock music, electronic music, and then your current job, which we're gonna get into. But to start off, what was your childhood like? What were your interests before getting into music, and then what made you get into music?
That's a great question, and thank you for having me, Kumar. This is great. I guess I grew up in a big family. I have 6 brothers, and then my mom and my dad were kind of sort of musically inclined. They didn't do anything professional, but there was always music around the house. There was a big organ, the only instrument in the house that all my brothers played, and I would just listen to him playing all the time. I have vivid memories of my mom singing to me when I got sick or whatever when I was a little kid, and we had this book of songs, and I would just pick whatever song and she knew it and she would sing it to me while I was sick. So all these things, and there was just a lot of music, a lot of records, my brothers playing instruments. A lot of our traditions, I grew up in Venezuela, and a lot of our traditions involve some sort of orchestra thingy, a group of people playing music for a lot of the religious things and whatnot. And so we would have people playing instruments around the house all the time. And and then I just started playing organ on my own, and then my mom signed me up in lessons, and I did that for a few years, and it just, I don't know, I had this thing with music. I would hear songs and just play them by ear. I was not great reading, which I kind of regret. So I would just cheat a little bit. I would go to the lessons and the teachers would play the songs and I would just learn it by ear. And they could tell I wasn't reading, and then they're like, "You're not reading." And I was like, I'm sorry.
That's how I was, because I sing. And when I first joined the chorus here at Soda, I couldn't read music at all. But all my life I just learned to hear it, and then I just replicate it, different runs, different vocal lines, whatever. Yeah. So that's literally how I got by my first 2-3 years here, just by ear. And then I think second semester junior year, I really started taking it serious to actually try and learn the music, and now I'm pretty good. So, but I feel that's how all great musicians start, is they just have the natural ability for it, so they really just do everything by ear, and then they start learning the actual techniques and the different music readings. But all right, so that's how your music interest started. But were you interested in anything else as a kid?
Not really. I don't remember being interested in a lot of sports. My dad played softball. All my brothers played something. I didn't play anything. I would just listen to music and play keys all the time. And then when I was 13, probably, I started meeting other musicians in high school, and we started dreaming of having a band, right? And there was at least one of them that was the roadie of high schoolers band. And we just started talking about it, and then the guy buys a drum set, and then we set up a little practice room, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna start a band. This is cool, right?" And of course, I was gonna play the keys because that's what I could play. But then I realized I can't really move this big old organ from my house to just carry it around. I mean, I don't have a car. How am I going to do that? So I was like, maybe I'll just play guitar because I can carry that around.
That's always
little did I know I needed an amplifier or any of these things. I just thought I just needed a guitar. And I signed up for lessons, took lessons for about a year. And then I really got way more interested. At this time, I started watching a lot of concerts, concert films and things like that. There was this little theater in my hometown where you would pay a little bit of money, maybe $1 or something, and then just watch, Queen and Guns N' Roses live or whatever, right? Because you couldn't buy those things in the store. So watching more of those things was even more impactful. I was like, wow, like music can take you to all these places. And there was somewhat of a rock scene in Venezuela, not huge like in other countries, but it was pretty cool. So I started listening to those bands too. I started attending some concerts, and that really kind of sparked it. Way more interest in
Because I was gonna ask about that when I was researching about you. You talked a lot about how you loved rock music, like you said, Queen and bands like that. And I was gonna ask you, like, how did you really get into that? But that's really interesting.
Well, our airwaves were really filled with a lot of American and British rock, just because that was the young thing to do. I mean, we had our own stuff, right, and all the Latin rhythms or whatever. But there were the alternative radios playing all this other stuff, and there's an interesting phenomenon in Latin America. There were some dictatorships during the 80s, and one particular one in Argentina, they went to war with England over the Falkland Islands. So in that whole thing happening, they banned any broadcasting in English. So there was no American or British bands playing on the radio. So that gap needed to be filled. And of course, all these kids were listening to the Queens and the Led Zeppelins and their whatever. But they started making their own music like that, but in Spanish. And then the government was like, well, yeah, we can let these kids do the thing because, even though it's not our music, it's in Spanish, so that'll please the youth. And those bands become really big at that time. And that was also kind of inspiring. Like, it was not something distant, but also bands in the region were growing because of these things happening in the world. And but yeah, a lot of them were heavily influenced by the Genesis and the Pink Floyds and the whatever, the Cure or what have you. And those bigger ones started influencing the smaller ones, and that's how that music comes to my country. And not only we had rock, we had reggae, ska, and things from like the Caribbean, Jamaica and whatever. So there was a big, so there was a big influence of that also. So we really had a very rich,
rich culture of music.
Musically.
Okay. Now, I heard a lot of bands and artists that you just mentioned. So what were your favorite, either like locally or just of all time?
All time, rock-wise, I would say Pink Floyd is my all-time favorite, and Queen is really close there. Also The Cure, because I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
So they were really big too, the post-punk era. Locally as in South America, Soda Stereo was probably the biggest thing.
I feel like I've heard of them.
That ever happened to South American rock. They were so big, and they disbanded back in '97. They were so big that Cirque du Soleil, right? They have done numbers on 4 musical acts: Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, and Soda Stereo.
Wow.
So they were that big.
Legendary.
They were super legendary, and then the singer went on to do like a solo career that was very, very important too, and then he passed a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Those are my biggest influences.
Okay. Now, talking about influences, and like you said, you started a band when you said you were around like 13?
No, that's when I started playing music. I probably started a band when I was... Well, that was a dream of a band that never happened. We never... that never came to fruition. But then when I was in maybe, 10th grade or something, then I started playing with bands. Yeah.
Now, how many bands have you been a part of?
Back then, maybe 3 or 4.
Okay.
That were making like their own music, like original music.
And this is when you were still in Venezuela?
Yes.
Okay, correct. So when did you move to America?
I moved to America in 2004, so that's 20 years ago. Wow. Yeah, I was 24, and all that stuff was already in the past. I had been between age 15, 16 to 23 or something. I went on to make records locally. We didn't become like famous like that, but we did some kind of important things that there were articles about it, and there are books that have talked about what we did as a band from province. We were not from the capital. We were not from a big city. We were from a small college town, think of Athens, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of broke the mold, and as in we were playing rock as your typical bass guitar drums, but
Right.
we also incorporated electronic elements to it.
I was going to ask about that.
And this is the Andes region of Venezuela, which stretches all the way down to
Right.
Chile, right? So it's in the mountains. So we were called the Electronic Andes, and that became like a little movement of like a cluster of bands and DJs and things like that.
Okay.
That was not as big at the time, so it was kind of like a breakthrough thing to happen in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and we gained some recognition for it, and I'm really proud of the work we did.
As you should. I'm gonna ask, like, how did that fusion of that happen in that region? Like,
Well, being a college town and also a very touristy area, kind of like a tiny Alps, if you will.
okay.
We had a lot of European influence, people coming through teaching.
Right.
I mean, some people will come and visit and then stay and teach and then live the rest of their lives there. So university being like spread around town, we got big on internet early on, bigger than any other city in the country. And also one of my bandmates who was from Spanish descent, he would travel a lot and bring a lot of records. And this it was a family thing. Like he came from a family of like art curators and things like that. They had like the biggest record library I've ever seen. That was a rehearsal room. So we had a bunch of records, and then he would bring stuff in his travels.
Okay.
And obviously when we were teenagers, it was all about rock and metal and all this stuff. But as we grew up and started checking other things around what we were listening to,
Right.
he started bringing a lot of Kraftwerk and
love
Paul
Kraftwerk.
Oakenfold and things from different eras in electronic music. And we were like, oh, this is cool too, man. Like, I clearly remember this one, kind of a rave thing that happened at this house, and somebody brought these two guys from Canada playing live electronic music. They had a big old sampler, like an MPC,
okay.
and a laptop. I'd never seen this stuff before. I was like, wow. And they had a flute too, and it was crazy. So we ended up meeting the guys, and then my friend bought the MPC from these cats. And the other guy had a laptop with Fruity Loops too.
Yes.
Not FL Studio.
Fruity Loops.
The previous thing.
Yes.
And the guy just gave us a copy of the program.
That's
And,
nice.
And off we went, to like start trying to create
Experiment,
stuff,
basically.
experiment, see how we would like chop samples and create our own things. And then we, at that time we were rehearsing regularly, and then we were like, let's bring these things to the studio and see what we can do. And yeah, that kind of sparked a whole like thing.
Wow. So you were like recognized in your country basically for fusionizing
100%,
that.
yeah.
Okay, so like I said, moving to America, what was your jumping off point there after all that success in your home country?
Well,
What was your mission in America basically?
so my bandmates started kind of moving out, pursuing different careers. A lot of them in the arts. I was the only one among my friends that was not studying anything art related, other than studying my instrument, right? So they moved to Spain and other countries, whatever, and then at some point we went through another, politics is everything in South and everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So we had this like big general strike that lasted like a year.
Wow.
So I had not a whole lot to do. No school, no nothing. So I started playing more and playing covers and things like that. And then one day, I told a friend we should do something with an orchestra. I would love to do something with an orchestra. And I thought he didn't make anything out of it. Like he just was sure, whatever. And then weeks later, he came back with some arrangements. Like, because I in my mind, I wanted to do like a Pink Floyd symphony tribute.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we were doing it. Like we started working on it. But, again, everybody, reaches adult life and they take different paths.
Right.
So that was around the time I was graduating from dental school. I had I decided to take a sabbatic, and I had a brother and a cousin here in the country. So I just came in and spent a summer, and I was like, yeah, this could be something. And then went back, and life kind of took me back to like, reconsidering moving to the States, which I did. And at the beginning, I was just starting a family and looking to further my career in dentistry, which is what I had graduated from. And then, life went up and down, up and down, up and down. And I just couldn't bring myself to push further in the dentistry field. I never really came back home to read any journals or anything on dentistry. It was all music. It was watching concerts, going to concerts, watching concerts. It was
kind of pulling you.
Exactly. Always. Like, it's something that you just, when it's part of your life, you can't shake it. And I kept recording things for my friends. I learned, I self-taught how to work on DAWs and interfaces, which I didn't know. That was going to be
another question of mine.
So my friends did that. I would just show up and record. I had no idea how to do any of this stuff. But the first thing I bought here when I got like a job was an interface. That's my first paycheck. So it was always part of my life. So at some point I was like, I'm kind of lost in my adult, quote unquote, professional life. I don't really want to push the dentistry thing. What should I do?
Yeah.
And this is the time where a local artist by the name of Rory had released an album, and it was kind of the theme was very like rebellious and like, break off of the rules or whatever, societal mandates and whatnot. And a guy that I had met was involved in that record, so I just went to the release party. And I was probably the only adult in the release party. Everybody else was like 17 or 18. I was like, wow. But there were a bunch of kids, and this happened downtown somewhere. A bunch of kids were carrying an SAE backpack.
Backpack? And
I was like, oh, that's right. We have SAE in Atlanta. And I had visited it years earlier. And I was like, and it may have been just like a midlife crisis. And I was 35 at the time, by the way. So I'm like, I should go and pursue this thing.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
And then I got on it, and then less than a year later, I had sign up for the program and started in 2015. And
wow.
It kind of took off from there.
And that's how you met Mr. Baldwin.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a story. Wow. Yeah. So you went to SAE. Now, after that, after you got, your expertise, your experience, what was your first job in the music industry like?
Probably while I was still going through school, I had met some cats in the music scene, and they were doing these local shows with local artists. It's something called the ATL Collective. Mm-hmm. And they had this concept of like, let's relive an album that everybody knows, the Beatles' White Album or whatever.
Okay.
But the catch was like, we'll have a local artist that is actively making music, and they're going to be the feature artist. And the first 30 minutes of the show is their music. Mm. So come to listen to your favorite album and discover your new favorite artist. It was a really cool concept.
Yeah, I love that.
And I was like, oh, this is cool. So I started kind of like chasing them around and going to all their shows, and I will buy like 6-month packages and stuff like that. And then randomly I met one of the guys one day.
Oh, wow.
One of like the board guys. And I went on to explain that I was a musician and I was pursuing audio and all these things. So he invited me to record the shows, because they were taking videos, but the audio was from the camera, which is never awesome.
Yeah.
So he was like, do you think you can record these shows? And at that point, I was like halfway into the program. And I was like, yeah, I can do this, somehow. I don't know how, but,
I can figure it out.
Yeah, I totally had to figure it out. So, and then I started doing this. So that was probably my first official gig as an audio person. And so now I'm in the venues talking to the sound guys or the production managers. Hey, by the way, I'm here to record the show. Who can I talk to get a cable so that I can plug my laptop
to the board and all that? Yeah.
And get a because my mission was to get a multi-track, not just like the left-right mix from the console.
Okay.
Because at that point you're mixing for the room, but not really for like a video quality, like a concert film quality thing. So I was like, let me record multi-track and then I'll go home and mix it. And that made a big change for the ATL collective. And at the same time, I was already networking with the venues. Little did I know I would end up running some of them.
Which I feel like that's a good tip. Always network.
Yes. So
always network.
When you're out there, as small as the assignment might look like, it can spark bigger things, and you just don't know it. You're just talking to all these people, and then you have the right attitude, and then you kind of play nice with everyone. You know, live audio tends to be a tough environment, and you talk to like kind of rough people sometimes, and sometimes you're kind of bugging them by, you know, can I have your Firewire cable? Remember Firewire?
Firewire.
But, you know, if you navigate those, you know, social interactions, you can gain a lot of points.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I went on to discover that by the time I was finishing the program had this career services person, Brad, which was an awesome guy. And he knew everybody in town. And he kind of makes a profile of like, what do you like? What are your interests? Like, what do you want to do? And now half of me was like, I would love to work in a studio, but half of me had this love for live music. And he caught that in the interview, and then he was like, okay, maybe I'll connect you with some live sound situations. And then my first internship was at Terminal West, which is one of our sister venues of the place that I work at now. And I went to shadow some people and just see how they do it and help a little bit.
Get your footing in, you know?
Yeah. Just, you know, roll cable, you know, coil cables and do little things and watch, take notes a lot of taking notes, and just, you know, networking again, just not being in anybody's way. And that was a big thing for me, because, you know, then the next thing is that they are paying me to run monitors every now and then.
Paying you for your passion.
Exactly. It's kind of crazy times.
Yeah.
You know,
because you said that you started at SAE, what, 2015?
2015, yes.
So it's been like, what, 10 years, and
it's about to be 10 years since I started. So yeah, there's that thing also where I knew that the odds for me were a little, you know, against, because I started like at an older age. You know, a lot of people in this field start really young, and by the time they're 35, they have probably 10 years of experience or more, and they have better chances, you know, technically. So I still was like, it's something I was just compelled to just keep pushing and see.
Yeah, as you should.
You know,
I feel like the music industry is like so, what's the word? Like ageist? Like just like even like stars, but also like people like behind the scenes too. It's like, oh yeah, like he started at 30. Like what? Like he's still valuable as a person.
It's funny you bring that up, because it is ageist, but it also contradicts itself in its ageism. So you're too old to start.
Right.
But if you're too young, then you're too young also.
Right.
So who is this kid trying to... So it's... And I try to, you know, one of my quests nowadays is like, I try to like not judge people by any of those things, because if you're talented, you're talented. I really don't care how old you are. I don't care how long you've been doing it either, because sometimes people will associate experience with how many times the world went around the sun while you're doing the thing. But if you're not improving, are you really experienced, right? So I've seen people like, just to give you a quick example, I have my LDs, like the lighting directors at the venue that I work at now. I have the oldest in the company. He's probably 72. He's been doing it for like 50 years. I also have the youngest one. He's 21.
Wow.
And he's probably been doing it for a couple of years. And they're just as good. They also interact real well. They work together real well. We just redesigned the lighting rig, all the lights for the venue. And they work together in redesigning that and installing it in the site.
That's amazing.
So I had no problem with this guy being this age or this guy being
Yeah.
this age. Like that.
As long as they can do their job and they have the talent for it, I feel like there shouldn't be a problem.
Exactly.
Like,
It should never be a thing. Yeah.
but speaking of your current job, can you tell everybody where you work at now?
So I work at Variety Playhouse. Variety Playhouse is a venue in Little Five Points. It's been there for a long time. It used to be the Euclid Theater back in the 1940s.
Wow.
And then I had some iterations of that. It was a theater, then it was kind of like a movie theater, and then it may have been closed for about a decade, and then back in the 90s, they reopened it as a concert venue. And it's been Variety Playhouse since then, like for 40 years. That was when I moved to America, and I came to a concert in Atlanta. That was the first venue I visited.
Oh, wow. That's like destiny.
In 2006. Then I moved to Atlanta in 2008. That was the first concert I attended, and I've seen many concerts that I love in there. Wow. Some of my first recordings also happened there, and it's just kind of full circle. That now I'm the production manager, which is I'm responsible for basically coordinating all aspects of production of every concert that happens there. Who's coming? What do we have? What do they need? What can we offer? What's the budget?
Yeah.
And how can I make all of these things come together for every single show at the venue? So that's my current job.
Big deal. So that is crazy. That's like really full circle. Like, whoa. Yeah. Okay, so let's get a little crazy here. Well, not crazy, but what is like one of your craziest like job stories like that you can share here?
Ooh, yeah. Because I did sign NDAs on my touring years. Craziest story that I can share. Let me think about that for 2 seconds. Well, before doing this current job, I tour the world quite a bit. I work with different artists. It's crazy sometimes to just be at a concert setting and then see all these other artists that you look up to. Yeah. And you thought you would never see in person. But a crazy one. Okay, ACL, Austin City Limits Festival in 2019. With the artists that I was touring with at that time, we come in and set up really early, like probably before noon. I'm looking at the lineup just to kind of keep track of where I'm at on the schedule. Right. And at the time I'm setting up my stuff, I see a name Phineas, but I don't know who he is. Oh. And he's on stage, and I just have no idea. Right? And I'm setting up my stuff.
Are you serious?
And then, so he's performing there, super talented. And then his family is right next to me as I'm setting up my stuff, but I just don't know who his family is. Right. But I felt like this presence. Short presence with a little green hair on top. Oh. And I'm like, the corner of my eye caught it, and I was like, is this Billie Eilish right next to me? And lo and behold, it was Billie Eilish right next to me.
Did you get a picture? Like,
no. When you work in that industry as a tech or whatever, you're never supposed to.
That's understandable.
Act even starstruck or ask for anything.
I still would have freaked out.
Internally, I kind of did. I was like, oh my God. But, you have to act professional. And I just kept going about and she noticed that I noticed, but, you just don't bother them because they are, constantly,
and like that's her private time too. So.
Exactly. So that was kind of a crazy one that I can think of that I can share. There are crazier ones that I can't, but that's one where, and then when we have guests, artists on stage that you just are thrown into a show schedule and, so by the way, so-and-so are going to join the main artist on stage. And, in one show I had Tyler, the Creator, and Steve Lacy.
Oh my God.
Just they run to me real quick. I have to set them up with in-ears and microphone, and off you go and do the thing and walk out. And, yeah, those kind of things are kind of cool too.
I would freak out, like truly. I'm not built
Yeah.
for that. Like, because I'd literally see them running up and be like, I just freeze and I have to do a job. Like, I'd be like
Yeah.
frozen. Like,
Yeah, Coachella was another one where
oh my God, you worked Coachella?
yes, in 2023, and we were right before Bjork, and
love
I was
Bjork.
standing right next to her, like quick change little tent, and she bumped on me as she was going to her thing, and she had this like weird dress with all these spike thingies.
Usual
and,
Bjork stuff.
and that was a moment where I was like, oh my God, this is
Yeah,
crazy.
I'd lose. I love Bjork
Yeah.
so much. Like, I'd lose my marbles.
Yeah,
Seriously.
yeah.
That is crazy. So, okay. You worked all these shows. You said you casually listening Coachella, Austin City Limits. Like, what is your like biggest like gig or accomplishment that you still think about to this day? Like, wow, I really did that. Like, I really worked that.
I will tell you, right after pandemic time, I was with this one artist, and we were direct support for Tyler the Creator, and
Wow.
the highlight of that tour was 2 nights at Madison Square Garden,
Wow.
which I could not believe I was doing that, and I kind of cried a little bit that night.
Yeah, I would cry too.
Yeah, I was like,
What?
I'm really here. And
The
we're
amount of
doing 2 nights.
legends and legendary performances. Wow.
Yeah, so that's definitely a highlight for me. It was bittersweet because I couldn't really go out and celebrate with anybody. We were all like keeping distance and wearing masks and all these things. But I celebrated internally because I was like, I can't believe I'm
That
doing a
is
show
insane.
here. Yeah.
Okay, so we asked the audience beforehand to think of questions to ask you and everything. And now that we've heard a little bit about you, does the audience have any questions?
Don't be shy.
Other than the fact that you worked with really cool, talented people in really cool places, what was your favorite artist to work with?
I would say Kali Uchis was my favorite.
I love
Yeah.
Kelly.
I worked for 5 years with her, and she was the sweetest person to work for. Like,
Really?
it was cool. Yeah.
I love her so much.
That was Black Bear also was really cool to work for.
Yo.
Yeah.
Peep how he's just casually like mentioning all these artists. Like, what?
I've been lucky. Like, I really am grateful for my experiences.
We
for
have
sure.
another
Yeah.
question.
Do you have any like advice when it comes to like getting connections with like bigger artists and stuff like that?
Well, it's, like I said, even at your smallest gig, the first little thing you do, that corporate party or that little bar or whatever, you're always making connections because you never know how big that stuff is going to get, right? There was a time when I was a photographer for this Latin magazine, and I was sent to cover some show, and the opening artist was there kind of waiting for the green light to start, and they would just like push it back to the point where the headliner showed up, and they're like, you can't perform anymore because the headliner is here and he's ready to perform. But I met that little crew of people that were, technically nobodies. I met their sound guy who went on to become my friend and my mentor later in life. It was just a casual, hey, what's up?
Yeah.
Whatever, here's my Facebook at the time. It was a cool thing. We exchanged social media or whatever, and we started following each other. He produced this Rory record that was synced with some movie, and it became bigger and bigger. And then at the time that I was in school, I told him, he was looking for an intern on Facebook. And I was like, I can be your intern. And he's like, don't you work in a dental office or something? And I'm like, yeah, I'm quitting my job. And he's like, what?
Yeah, quitting being.
And he had been
dentist.
at that office. It was like a big office. And he's like, you're crazy, right? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, I really like this stuff, so I want to pursue this career. And he's like, I like you. Come and be my intern. So I just went and like tidied up the studio wasn't even a studio. It was like a basement. So it seemed like nothing at the time.
But that's something. Still
But
to
it
start
was
from.
he was making records there, and then he was touring with R&B artists doing playback, and then he introduced me to that world. Mm-hmm. So it was just this little connection that I had made, I don't know, 5 years earlier, that became a defining thing for me, because then he was like, you are ready to go out and tour. So he gave me my first touring job as a playback tech.
Just because you were there.
And it's just like that. It's just all these people you meet, you never look down upon, no matter what the situation is. As small as it can seem, you don't know what else they're cooking, basically. And it can just, you can be brought into that bigger situation at some point. And it's, yes.
Can you explain what a playback tech is?
So playback is the obscure art of bringing the studio to life. And it's something that not a lot of people talk about, but there's a lot of opportunity to start in the touring world. So basically, all the recording that's done in the studio, you have all these stems, right? You have all these tracks, vocals and sequences and synths and things. And then the artist will hire a band, and, they will try to reproduce some of those things live. But sometimes it's like very specific synths, very specific things that
you can't replicate live.
You can't replicate. So you will bring some of these things from the recording into your live situations. So there's a guy off the stage, normally, sometimes it's a drummer too, with a couple computers, and they will just blend what's happening live with what was brought from the studio. And they will throw maybe some other arrangements that are done during the rehearsals and production rehearsals. And it's a great way to start touring. Wow. So I can't
recommend it enough.
I can't recommend it enough. I can't stress how important. Yes. Are you in the band? You are in the band, but you're not in the band. Like, technically, you're not there. Technically, to the world, you're not there. But if you are really good
at what you do
in studio, because it's studio chops brought to the live world. You edit in real time sometimes.
Wow.
Like, when I say real time, the show could be going and 90,000 people are watching the show, and you are doing edits, and you have to make sure the computer doesn't crash.
That is nerve-wracking.
I've seen that happen. I've done it myself, and it's just a thing. But it's a great way, because there's a lot of demand for playback techs. Because there was a time where, half of the music industry were purists, and they're like, oh, no, we'll play everything live.
Everything live,
we will never, lip sync or whatever. It's not really lip syncing. You're just enhancing the show.
Yeah.
And you're making it more consistent for the paying audience that wants to see a record that sounds pretty close to the record.
Yeah.
But also with the live, seasoning on it, right?
Yeah.
So, Ableton is the tool for that. It used to be Pro Tools. Now it's Ableton. And I started using Ableton. I learned it on my own 20-something years ago.
Yeah, because I was going to ask, what DAWs do you use?
Yeah, normally I was strong on Ableton. I was completely ignorant on Pro Tools, but then your class and SA really made me really proficient on it. And I started my first few gigs as a playback guy were on Pro Tools, and then I worked with these cats that it's like a company. There are companies out there doing playback for artists, and they offer that service. And the guys that I work with, which is this guy that I told you is my mentor, he's Post Malone's playback guy.
Oh, wow.
And
Big
the
Posty.
main guy from that company used to work for Destiny's Child, and then Beyonce, and then
Hey, Mother.
J-Lo, and then the list goes on and on and on and on. And they were all doing Pro Tools, and then one day I was like, can we try Ableton? And guy was like, why? Come to my house and show me. And I showed him, we can do these things, and this is easier, and this is a little more stable, da-da-da. And he converted the entire team to Ableton.
Period.
And then it just became a thing in the industry. So, yeah.
Wow.
Playback is a really good opportunity. Yeah? I mean, I don't know if I did personally, but certainly in that team, I was able to convince the main guy to like, yeah, we
Convert.
can do this, and yeah, it's just a great tool.
Big ups to
Yeah.
Baldwin, period.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Joshua. So basically, I once heard, well, not once, but I have a friend. He told me that a good 80% of the tour is not just music, and it's more so like connecting. So my question is, could you basically explain your experience on tour?
So my first experiences were as a playback tech, merely just playing tracks, and then there's a click track that goes to the artist, and a click track that goes to the band, and then they kind of join in, and so it's like a hybrid of studio and live, right? But then locally, I was doing more monitors on stage for artists that openers for shows normally,
Right.
and then I also had my own band here in Atlanta. We were doing covers, but I was a guitarist, background vocalist, sound engineer, playback dude.
Oh, you were doing
I was
everything.
doing the whole thing. So I gained chops on like really making stuff happen quickly. And then when I went to be an intern and then a monitor tech at this small venue, it also, helped me understand connections, what connects everything, right?
Right.
We patch all the instruments to this patch bay, and then we have to split it into consoles, and there's a console on stage so I can run monitors for the artists so they can hear themselves and have a good experience. They want to hear, and everybody wants to hear things differently, so you can just do the one mix for
Right.
everyone. The singer wants more of their vocal and less of whatever, and then the drummer probably doesn't want any drums.
Right.
Or maybe just wants a tom or whatever, and so on and so forth.
And different
then
volumes
front of
and stuff
house
like that,
guy
too.
is the guy that runs sound for the audience. So it all is part of the experience of like, and there's radio frequencies involved, so somebody has to know how to coordinate that. Sometimes there's MIDI, sometimes there's time code, and everything is really, really connected. So I learned all these disciplines, and then when I went on tour, I started also doing monitors, and then at some point I had to do both for this one artist, and I had to learn to really, really connect
lock
every
in.
department.
Yeah.
Every department depended on my space bar, because I would hit the space bar and the show starts, and then there's MIDI. There's time code coming into my own console and changing the snapshots for every song.
Wow.
For every preferred thing that everybody has. There's time code going into video so the video can run in sync with the tracks and the music.
Right.
There's time code going to lights, so lights are also programmed, and they're like every hit, every
Wow.
downbeat is programmed. There's time code going to front of house to change their snapshots per song, because every mix is different. There's MIDI going to the keyboard guy to change their patch. There's MIDI going to the guitarist to change their patches too. Sometimes we will program certain actual notes to a synth because the keyboard guy was playing another synth, and we needed this little lead line.
That sounds so
So
stressful.
everything can be connected to levels that are really cool and make a show really consistent.
Yeah.
So when you do 37 shows on a tour, and everything works exactly the same every night, it's like,
Yeah.
it's very satisfying.
Because I bet that first night is so stressful, but the outcome of
Yes.
it is
And then redundancy, especially for playback, you run two computers in tandem, so they're both locked in, and when you hit play, both run.
right.
And there are these interfaces that have a sensor, and then on, say, laptop A, you have a sine wave running, and it's running all the time. Whether you start or stop, this sine wave is a plugin. It runs. If that sine wave gets interrupted for whatever reason, the interface switches to laptop B. So your show never stops. And I had a live streaming on Amazon happening, and my laptop A went down.
Wow.
And I
Imagine.
had to take a second to fix the other one, but because I had the rest of the show synced and sequenced and everything was triggered by different things, I could step away from my console for 2 seconds, fix the other laptop, restart it, and then find the downbeat for like the next chorus or whatever, hit play on that one, and then I have redundancy again. This
That
happens
is
in a matter of like
crazy.
seconds, and you have to, yeah.
That is great. I would be so stressed out. Like, that's ridiculous.
It's exciting. It keeps it interesting.
yeah, I bet.
Hey, my name is Zay, and my mom says there's a lot of cutthroat people in the industry. Like, is that true? And if it is, who's the like most snobbiest person you met?
So who's the most what?
It's like
Snobbiest person.
We have
Ooh.
NDAs involved, so I don't.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, but you know what? He's right. So there, it's very cut through. It's very dog eat dog type deal. I can name names really, but I have seen. So it's what we do is cool, right? And we work with celebrities, and we work with big names, and we rub shoulders with some others.
Right.
We don't become friends with really any of these people, for the most part. Some people are lucky to develop a friendship with their artists or
Right.
whatever, and they work with them for decades. It's not uncommon for people to let that go to their heads,
Right.
and then they become big-headed, and then they think they're the coolest thing ever.
You have the ego.
And it's just it's a thing. It really is a thing. I try to, with everybody that I work and everybody that I mentor, I try to, teach him like, you're about to do a lot of cool things in life, but don't let that ever get to your head.
Mm-hmm.
Don't inflate that ego, because what goes up can go down, So today you're my, junior LD or junior monitor person at the venue. Tomorrow you're doing arenas.
Right.
But then the next day you just don't know.
Yeah.
So don't burn bridges. And it's been a thing for a long time in the industry, which I openly fight, really. Things like ageism, egos, and things like that. It's part of it, unfortunately. It's very real. But it can be fought with like kindness. I feel
Yeah.
like, we're living different times where, the job is important and success, quote unquote, can be important, but the
Right.
human factor needs to be preserved and
Yeah,
protected.
still number one.
And protected at all costs. I have toured with really snobby people that, used to be my touring mates or friends or whatever. And they're not anymore because of that reason.
Wow.
And it's just sad, but, I have mentors that have taught me what to do to be, quote unquote, successful. And those that have been like the other way, I also consider my mentors because they teach me what not to be.
Right.
And you just kind of take notes and be like, I never want to be like this guy. Yeah, I don't want to ever treat anybody like that because it's just not cool.
Yeah.
There was this belief that, the more you puff your chest and,
Machismo.
the cooler you were and stuff. That stuff is dying out with the newer generations. I'm I guess technically Gen Xer or whatever. So we're kind of a transition between, the old and the new.
Right.
And I'm happy to see that die down and being called out too. There are public forums out there for roadies and where, somebody young comes and makes a question, and then somebody will try to bully him for making that question. And then I will, publicly go and be like, hey, cool
off.
It's good that you know what you know, but let's teach the young ones. Oh, they have to do the legwork. Well, not really. Why can't we just share our knowledge?
Yeah. There's a difference between educating and punching down.
Exactly.
And
100%.
I think like you said, like there's definitely a change happening where
Yeah.
the younger generation is actually trying to educate instead of a lot of the older generation punching down when they have that power. It's weird. It's very crazy.
weird. But it's dying down, and I'm happy
Yeah.
to see it die down.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Caden, and I just wanted to ask, which boards do you mainly use during, your live performances?
When I started, that's when digital was really happening, which it was a big change for a lot of us. I learned in analog consoles. I never operated anything big in the analog days, but X32 Behringer was a game changer, and it really made it accessible for people to learn a board. And that board is still popular to this day. Anybody trying to go on live sound right now should learn that console, because you will find it everywhere. Every church, every little bar, and some venues too. X32 or M32, they're kind of the same company. The format is basically the same thing. Very universal. Then I started doing Avid consoles on my first tour. I had to learn on the go because I begged people to teach me around town, and nobody really tried to teach me, so I had to learn on the job. Then Digico was another one that I used a lot. And then coming back home and starting a new house gig, the newer Avid consoles are also very popular and good to learn, because it's like Pro Tools on steroids. It's really cool because it's if you know Pro Tools, you kind of can get around these consoles real easy. Now on my new gig, Yamaha is the front of house console. My very last touring gig, I was doing Allen Heath D Live or SQ. All that range is very popular right now too. But a solid console to know and get gigs real quick is the X32 for real. Still, it's like a 20-year-old console, and it's still going, and everybody has one. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? I think this will be our last one as well before we wind down.
I wanted to ask, I'm Genesis, and I wanted to ask, who is the most creative artist that you work with? Like, who has done stuff that you've never seen before, and like the most creative stage sets, or the most creative music that you've heard, or stuff like that?
Ooh, man, I've seen so many shows in my life, and I've been involved with a lot of them. I didn't work directly with this artist, but they came through one of the last shows I did at the Eastern, which is another sister venue that I was working at for the past year as a stage manager. Justice, French electronic duo, kind of like the newer Daft Punk, if you will. Their lighting rig was insane. I mean, I'm a sound guy, but this lighting rig had all kinds of moving trusses and screens that would go up and down and do formations and things like that. I first saw that following this artist called Stromae. Oh,
I know.
From Belgium.
Yes.
I went to see him at MSG last year or 2 years ago, and that one was video walls with robotic arms that will take him out and again do formations and things, and then go back and just be a wall. That was crazy. Yeah, I don't know if the question was like musically or whatever, but music wise also, again, I had the fortune to tour with Caliuchis for years, and she's a very creative artist. Black Bear, not only his own music, but the other stuff that he wrote for everybody else, including Billie Eilish and Justin Bieber and people like that. I mean, he was very, very, very talented. Thundercat.
I love Thundercat.
Yes, I ran monitors for Thundercat for a good while, and man, talk about
he's insane.
Going insane musically. Good Lord. I mean, that
insane.
Keyboardist and that drummer, oh my God, yeah.
And him on the bass too.
And him on the bass is just out of this world. Yeah.
So yeah, that answers your question, Jen. All right. So I think that'll be it for this episode, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do you have anything to, promote, or anything that's happening in the future?
Well, come to shows, support shows, support live music. I work for 0 Miles. 0 Miles is the company that owns the Eastern Variety Playhouse in Terminal West and the Georgia Theater in Athens. We're part of the AEG conglomerate of venues and festivals and things like that. All kinds of, like, literally just support live music. That's the bread and butter of artists right now. You buy their merch, for real. I produce music too. I produce my wife's music. Her name is Arianna, and she just makes this like fusion of Latin, folk, and pop. So we have more things coming. So if you follow my social media or my website, I will be posting.
What is your social media website?
It's 5053x.com. It's a weird moniker.
We'll put it in the edit.
Yeah. I post all my stuff in there, and all my social media is 5053x. I'm at 5053x. The letter, I guess, is 5053x, I guess. I mean, I've been collaborating with other artists. I produce a reggae artist in Southern California also. His name is Aaron Wolf. I work still as a production manager for a local artist called Baby Rose.
I love her.
She's my main touring client right now, and she's great. Again,
I was gonna say, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Exactly. Yeah. She's. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, she's one of the coolest people that I work with too. I mean, she's just very talented. So yeah, again, just follow your local band, your friends that are out there. You know, the same support you put for artists you don't know, you should put for artists that you know. I think that's key for the life of any artist. So the support of their people. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's the episode. Thank you guys for watching, and everybody give a hand for Andres Sosa.
Thank you, Camar. Appreciate you. Thank you, Marc. Appreciate you.
Bye-bye.